Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Permanent values part 2. If you remember, we covered 8 values in our previous presentation, and we will have more of these presentations, highlighting some more values which define the structure of Deen. And these are the references, and this is our contact. Over here, just to point out that what is Islam, chapter 15 is there. So this is a typing error. A few general points about permanent values. I had given a general overview of permanent values in my previous presentation, but I remember some more points, so I thought to share those as well. The acceptance of Iman is a prerequisite for understanding the importance of these values, as they deal with the further development of the human self, which has acquired new life. So 2 points over here, that once we acquire Iman, and as a result of that Iman, we acquire a new life and then strengthen that life through salih deeds, then the importance of these values, i.e. permanent values, appears before us. Before that, we can know about them mechanically, but its true importance is very difficult to grasp without Iman. Without Iman, which brings about an inner change in the outlook of the human psyche, these values do not add to human understanding. And it is obvious, because if we are not concentrating on the purpose of these values and the way these bring change within our psyche, and for that psyche, we need a fertile mind, and that fertility only comes through Iman. By understanding these values and using them in our individual and collective life, we are able to see the manifestation of many of our latent potentials, which would otherwise have been unexplored. And I have touched this aspect as well, that some of the latent potentials which are kept within us, and how some of these can be brought out, how these can be manifested. Like becoming a physician, we acquire the ability to diagnose the disease of the patient and then to recommend treatment. And we know that in order to, for example, become a doctor, engineer, dentist, anything, there has to be a psyche acquired within us, which should be able to deal with the issues for which we have acquired that education and training. These values help us to diagnose all the ailments of the man-made systems, physical as well as psychological. And literally this is the case, because once we know that what are these permanent values and what kind of system can be developed and acquired within these values, man-made systems simply cannot even think about it. And the first potential which manifests itself is that we can never become deceived by the apparent glitter and allurement of the man-made systems. And there are verses in the Quran which point to this fact, that this word does find attraction for those people who work under relative values or work under the domain of their unbridled desires. And the moment we come within the domain of these permanent values, the reality of life hits us hard. We come to know the purpose of our existence on this planet, and then we are not deceived by this glitter and allurement and all those desires which arise within us without these permanent values, and we wish to pursue them. We can see through the whole facade of the Iblisi system. Through Iman and Saleh deeds, we are enabled to delve deep into the darknesses residing in the unguided minds, and through the light of the Quran, firstly, overcome our own weaknesses and failings, and then by sharing this guidance, keep on strengthening ourselves. And obviously, in relation to weaknesses and failings, we simply cannot identify them without the Quran. Some of the weaknesses and failings which we see under the man-made systems, even those are difficult to detect at times. But these weaknesses and failings related to human psyche can only be picked up through the light of the Quran. And Quran calls it darknesses, and that is why Quran calls itself light. So it is this light which helps to remove these darkness. Now we go to the next slide, permanent values covered in part 1. I thought to list these over here because since these all presentations going to be interconnected, so if we can list all these permanent values which are covered previously and the next one, that means in the last one we will have the complete list of these permanent values which we discussed over here. First one we covered was human self. Next was respect for humanity or respect as a human being. The concept of Allah, ranks according to deeds. Next, the law of requital was covered in some detail. Physical death and its importance, some aspects were touched. Justice and ihsan, and that is to help restore balance. The permanent values which are covered in this talk are the existence of the life of the hereafter, the consequence of a crime, no one carries the burden of another, not to allow injustice, no human being can be the subject of another one, obedience of the law, promote good and forbid evil, warning and admonishment. Let us go to the first value, permanent value of today's presentation, the existence of the life of the hereafter. When the Quran stated that the universe is created as al-haq and that every self, which is choice and its intent, is held accountable for his actions in this life, then it confirmed the continuity of the human self beyond physical death. And that's a very important point for us to keep in mind, that hereafter has to exist for the continuity of our life at the level of ourself. The issue before us is to explore the importance of the life of the hereafter as a permanent value in terms of its effects on the human psyche. It might appear as not a permanent value to some of us, but if we pay attention to it closely, then we will realize that existence of the hereafter, the way Quran has explained it, and the reality of it, and the fact of its existence, it does affect our psyche and it does change our outlook and may even change our conduct if in case we have recognized it and we are willing to change our outward behavior. This aspect will become clear if we take the example of two individuals who hold different views in relation to the life of the hereafter. One individual, thinking that life will end with his physical death, follows his unbridled desires. His psyche will be focused solely on accruing all the benefits of this life. The development of the self as a concept explained in the Quran will have no appeal for him. And this is the way the world at present is. And we can see this kind of psyche everywhere, particularly people at the top level. In contrast to this, the individual who holds his self accountable and is rationally convinced of the continuation of life at the self's level beyond death, his choices and conduct in life will be balanced and in line with the permanent values of the Quran. Of course, it is not an immediate effect. It takes time to sink in. And that is why we have this platform. That is why Tolu Islam exists, to help us to develop ourselves. So this value, if it is properly recognized in the context in which the Quran discusses it, then it is bound to affect our psyche, and it will affect it very positively. Both these outlooks on human existence will be visibly different. The Quran has pointed to this fact that when we make choices within the permanent values, our life becomes better with the passage of time. And this is due to what our hands send forward for our future. This future includes the later part of our earthly life too. And people do ask that where is the proof that the life of the hereafter exists? And the proof lies in two different behaviors which I mentioned over here. That the one who lives a life thinking that the life will end with death, his behavior, his conduct, his outlook, his psyche will be totally different as compared to the one who brings this concept through his understanding within himself and then acts on it. The hereafter, elaborating further. For the continuation of human accountability, there needs to be continuity of life beyond physical death. Otherwise, if man thinks that with death he cannot be held accountable, then we will get a world just like 2024. This shows a severely flawed psyche. And the important point over here is that in the world of 2024, this permanent value is totally missing. Nobody thinks of it, nobody talks about it. Even those who are on the religious plane also don't talk about it in their normal conversations. And Quran says, وَقَالُوا إِنْ هِيَا إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَبْعُوثِينَ. They say there is nothing but this life of the world. We will not be raised up again from dead. And that is an important point. The moment human being thinks that there is no life beyond death and there is no possibility of it and live life accordingly, they are, according to the Quran, living dead. They don't have life. The Quran presents the existence of the life of the hereafter as a fact and then discusses its rationale, inviting man to reflect on its importance in order to conceptualize it with the aim of bringing his desires through choice within its guidance. So one thing we should keep in mind as students of the Quran, that hereafter over here is not to create any fear. This should be taken as a positive thing because human beings have a desire to live forever, to live it in eternity. And here the Quran is providing us that choice, that yes, you desire to live forever, and here we give you a choice and you will verify it yourself through your own conduct, through your own change in psyche, that this hereafter exists. Since the addressee of the Quran is the human intellect and its reasoning potential, hence the argument of the hereafter begins by referring to the physical phenomena of the growing of crops. And Quran has used this example at a number of places. There appears to be no life in a seed prior to its being planted. And we can look at it. If somebody hasn't seen a seed growing, they will not believe it that this seed has the potential to grow into a big, for example, a mango tree. But once it is planted in fertile soil and the conditions are appropriate, then this seed grows to become that which is in accordance with the potentials held within it. A similar argument is used to explain to man that though the human body, being physical, dies, there is something within him which has the ability to grow beyond physical death, exactly like that seed. However, here the seed for further growth is to be created by man through iman and salih deeds. This is called acquiring new life. And this is a very, very important sentence which we are sharing, that here the seed for further growth is to be created by man through iman and salih deeds. This is called acquiring new life, that we have to create our own seed with all the things provided to us. That is our body, our choice and intent, and through this iman and salih deeds. And Quran helps us to acquire that seed, and that is the purpose of human creation. And the fertility of the system of deen in the hereafter will help it to grow further. And this fertility we have to create in this world by creating the system of deen for that seed which we have created within our own self, and that is called new life. And only after creating that new life, we will know the importance of creating a deen in the world. The life in the hereafter, its impact on the self. This is the reason so much emphasis is placed on creating the system of deen in this world for the growth and development of the human self in this physical life. This means that by starting to think beyond our physical existence, we grow beyond this biological existence. And that is another very important point. We have to grow out of our biological relations, because creating this life means that we look for people who are also willing to create new life or who have already created new life. And the needs of our self-development become apparent to us, for which we look to the permanent values. And that is where the permanent values come into play. Looking at this permanent value as the foundation stone of the collective system, we can easily figure out that this value will transform the outlook of the Islamic State, in which, while material progress will be important, it will be viewed from the perspective of human self-development. See, the whole aim will change. In this society, the aim is to develop yourself, and the emphasis on physical body will only be that much which is related to this self-development. I.e., for example, I have created new life and I want to do a lot of good in this life for the system of deen, and that is why I would like to live a longer life at a physical level, but a healthier life. And that will change complete outlook towards our diet, our doing exercise, towards having a better environment around us, and then full focus on self-development through solid deeds. This will lead to a transformation in the outlook of its members, who will now be focused on the self rather than on just meeting physical needs. And that is the purpose of our being on this platform. If we understand this point and we work in our own time on this and concentrate on it and think about it 24/7 and pick it up, then we will see that our life with one Sunday to another Sunday will be quite a different one. The transformation will be absolutely revolutionary, or as they say, that it will be accelerated in an accelerated mode. The absence of the concept of the hereafter is one major factor in creating imbalances in the man-made systems which we witness in the world. Without bringing this concept into our lives, we simply cannot achieve balance in the human psyche, and an imbalanced and conflicted psyche cannot understand the higher purpose of life towards which the Quran points our attention from the beginning to the end. And we can also see that if a nation does not have hereafter in its day-to-day functioning, then it simply is concentrating on physical aspect of life, and physical aspect of life always will have an expiry date on that. And that is why all these nations, these are bound to decline at some point, and another nation then takes its place. Next permanent value is the consequence of a crime. Even under man-made systems where the system does not tolerate criminal activity and holds its citizens accountable, this system functions better compared to those societies where a lax attitude is displayed towards criminal activity. And for example, one law for the rich and another for the poor. In fact, this is the state in every country of the world. Some are more stringent in terms of implementing their laws just to control the public. It is observed based on evidence that in those areas which are backward and underdeveloped, the crime rate is higher compared to affluent areas. Children who are brought up in broken homes, poor schools, economic deprivation, bad company, criminal environment, etc., are more likely to grow up prone to criminality. Whatever the system of justice may be, it will not be able to cope if respect for laws disappears. Next is, the Quran has made the state responsible for promoting respect for laws, and the state assumes the responsibility to act on behalf of the victim in all cases. This is called the law of qisas. Qisas means to pursue a criminal in order to obtain recompense for the crime he has committed. And Quran says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Just see, there are two terms used in relation to human intellect and human self. In the law of qisas, there is life for you, O man of understanding, so that you become muttaqi. So this verse, for example, clearly points that it should be done under a system. It is not about individuals taking laws in their own hands, whether those individuals go against the laws deliberately or they are forced to go against the law. The next is further elaboration of this permanent value. In relation to the system of deen, this is not an individual's responsibility, but is the duty of the system. No individual can take the law into his own hand. However, part of the permanent value is to promote respect for the law and obedience to it. And in any case, when we know that this law is working in our favor, and it is a just law based on the Quran, and it will help me to develop myself, then one develops that a sort of favoritism towards that law, that this law is for my advantage, I must follow it. So that people can have full confidence and trust in the state justice system, that no one will be treated unjustly, as noted in 45:22. While the focus of the Quran is on human self-development, it also draws our attention to the human proclivity to commit crimes, and for this it has provided guidance. This process of reforming society is slow initially, but with the passage of time, those children who are brought up in a reformed system will grow up righteous and the crime rate will be very low. That is why there is a lead time involved. There's a time duration involved in it, that from the time when the system of deen starts taking shape and when it is fully mature and up and running, then we have to patiently go through it and with a lot of resoluteness. If human basic needs are adequately met, then gradually through education and training, people will acquire the ability to recognize their weaknesses and emotive biases in the light of the guidelines provided by the system. And we have seen through all these presentations that how much emphasis Quran is putting on changing our psyche, because the moment our psyche changes, then our outer world changes. In fact, even under man-made system, when our psyche transforms in the light of the Quran, we see the world differently. We see the world which can be easily transformed into the system of deen. And that is where hope lies. A comprehensive plan needs to be worked out under this permanent value in conjunction with other permanent values. And we will see that once we come to the end of these permanent values, the salient permanent values, that there is a very, very close interconnection between these values. One are dependent on others. Next permanent value is no one carries the burden of another. It is the demand of justice that everyone owns his personal responsibility and is fully aware of this. That is two important aspects. First, the individual should know what are his responsibilities and duties. And second is then he should know that he is supposed to carry that. And he is responsible for that. Human beings have the tendency to exploit others, where they let others do the hard work while they themselves live on the outcome of this hard work of others. And that is why there is a relationship between duty and responsibilities and rights. If I have certain duties and responsibilities, I carry out those duties and responsibilities, then as a result of that, I will have a right. We can't have rights without carrying out certain duties and responsibilities. This is against the value of وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, that man can have nothing but what he strives for. And this is true according to the law of requital, that whatever we are doing in this finite life, our self is developing in direct proportion to those efforts and thoughts. But what Quran is saying is that this should be the value within the man-made system as well. This value covers both aspects, i.e. the physical body as well as the human self. We are given this body in order to develop ourselves, and this is where the secret of understanding the significance of human physical existence lies. The self has to get the best out of this physical body within the confines of the permanent values. This sentence, in my view, is very important, because once we develop ourselves and acquire that psyche which the Quran is asking us to acquire, then body becomes subservient to our developed self, not to our desires, not to our unbridled intellect and emotions. But since intellect and emotions and desires have come under these permanent values, which we have brought them in willingly, then our body is bound to follow the dictates of ourself. If the body is meant to work for its own livelihood and then willingly make available what is spare for the larger good of society, but it fails to even earn enough for its own needs, then there is a serious failing. The society needs to play its role in providing jobs, etc. And this is true about the man-made system, where human bodies, some of human beings, they work from morning till evening and they do not earn even enough to make their own self and family live. And that is important, because, and this happens when people, everyone does not put in their best in the society and the system is unjust. And Quran draws our attention to this aspect, that whatever resources are given to you in terms of your body and intellect, you should use them to their maximum potentials. For this failure to earn enough for its own subsistence, we need to look to the underlying causes, and we can easily find these within the functioning of the man-made systems. Under man-made systems, the concentration of wealth ends up in the hands of a few only. And the normally cited phrase is trickle-down economy does not work, and the gap between the rich and poor keeps on widening with the passage of time. And we can see the glaring examples in every country. The issue here which we need to try and understand is, why do people accumulate more than they need to meet their needs? And this is human default position under the unbridled desires, that is without the guidance of the Quran. And that is where we need to concentrate. The next slide is, no one carries the burden of another. Continuing with that, the Quran has declared, Allah taziru waziratum wizra ukhra, that no bearer of a burden shall bear the burden of another. And under the law of requital, simply no one carries the burden of another. We carry our own burden because everything works at self's level. But this is more applicable to human system. That is, Quran is asking us that create a system in which everyone takes their own responsibility. And there has to be a procedure for accountability. And ideally, it should not be mechanical. People should willingly understand the higher purpose of life and then give their best. And of course, the state should provide opportunity to them. This is applicable to both aspects of the human life, i.e. the physical aspect as well as the human self. So important thing is that we are given a body, and we should see that, am I getting the best out of this body? Am I doing everything which I'm supposed to do? And this should include as much involvement of our body in our day-to-day chores as well, even within the man-made system, and keeping in view that Allah has given me this body, it has certain potential, certain abilities, I should make use of those. And of course, sleeping is part of it, that it should be given proper rest and sleep. The law of requital deals with this effectively. Acquiring an understanding of the functioning and impact of these permanent values is firstly related to the human self. We have seen under the human self and the functioning of the law of requital that whatever we do leaves an impact on ourself. This is simply unavoidable. Therefore, coming to terms with this aspect of human accountability will lead to understanding the importance of creating balance in the society, where people hold themselves accountable for whatever they do, not under the relative values of the unjust human systems, but within the domain of the permanent values. And this is an important aspect even in our day-to-day living, that for example in our house we should see what work is still can be carried out. Rather than sitting idle, we should look for work within the house and do some improvements. And this is part of widening our vision, trying to see where the problems are and how can we solve those problems at an individual level. When this value forms the basis of the system of deen, then it helps in transforming the overall collective psyche of the people, who then take full responsibility for their thoughts and conduct. And the short-term desire for immediate gains disappears. Life is then viewed not as one life, but as an external entity which is bound to reap benefits in the long term, both physically as well as cognitively. Let us go to the next permanent value, not to allow injustice in the world, and of course, wherever we are, even within our family. And injustice means doing evil. While doing justice is a permanent value, not to allow injustice is also a permanent value. This essentially means that we need to be fully aware of any injustice in the society in which we live. And in the wider context, we should be aware of what is happening in the world in which we live our finite life. The Quran has declared the law of requital to be just, and injustice simply cannot enter its domain of operation. And that is why Quran emphasizes that in the outer world, there is deen of Allah working and there is no injustice anywhere. And within your own world, you bring deen of Allah and then this injustice will disappear. And we know about this verse, it has stated, وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And which means that Allah has created this heavens and the earth as bil-haq, for constructive results. And of course, constructive results includes making best use of our body as well as our self, our choices. And وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ, so that every nafs, every self which is making choices and is making decisions is held accountable, gets the recompense of what it does. وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, and there is no injustice done. And which means Quran is saying that establish a system in which everyone is held accountable, and held accountable happily. They themselves are willing to be accountable so that they can get the best in this life as well as in the hereafter. And none of them is treated unjustly. So the system has to be absolutely transparent. Since Allah's system is supposed to be free from all kinds of injustices, hence Mu'mineen need to aim for the system in which all existing injustices need to be firstly identified, then addressed gradually and firmly, and steps taken so that no further injustices occur in the land. This also means that those who are aiming to act under this permanent value need to come to grips with its finer aspects during the phase of self-development. And of course, for these finer aspects, sub-clauses will be defined through mutual consultation. Prevention and removal of injustice leads to the creation of balance and justice in society, which builds trust and confidence among the members of the society as well as to the management at the top. Continuing on that, the Quran has stated, La tazlimuna wa la tuzlamun. Deal not unjustly and you shall not be dealt with unjustly. This is stated in relation to riba. If we look at the first part of the verse, it is in relation to riba, but as a value, it is applicable to the whole system in all its dealings as an immutable principle of life. Neither do evil to someone nor allow evil to take place. And we know riba also deals with that surplus wealth in a society which creates problems in the world because of accumulation in few hands. Another important aspect of this and other values is to raise the awareness level within society to a very high level so that those who wish to create imbalances face difficulty in finding any support around them for this. Evil, like communicable diseases, spreads from individual to individual. So in such a society, doing wrong, doing injustice should become rather impossible. Recognizing and becoming aware of the plight of the poor, yatim and miskeen in society helps in understanding the state of development of a society. And yatim and miskeen over here means those who are left alone, whose running business has stopped for some reason, who have faced some grief, some tragedy. As a result, they cannot earn their own living and are left stranded. And of course, it includes orphans. In fact, this should serve as a motivation and incentive to learn and work for the system of Deen. The Quran has directed us, Uzina lillazina yuqataluna bi annahum zulimu. To those against whom war is made, permission is granted to fight because they have been wronged. Very important verse. We should look at rest of the verse in Surah Al-Hajj. Not doing wrong yourself and stopping injustice is a permanent value. Next permanent value is no human being can be the subject of another one. The human trait of freedom to choose and act demands that he is free to make choices in his life, and there are minimum restrictions placed on him in the execution of these choices. And we can see this value being contravened under the man-made system, where some have more freedom of choices as compared to those who are at the lower end of the society, and they are in majority. The law of requital demands that he should also be aware of the consequences of his choices so that he makes correct choices in order to avoid any harmful outcomes. And we can see how Quran is making us aware as students of the Quran that it is not a question of my own choices and my own intent and decision making, even if I'm a beneficiary of the system. It wants us to create a new life in order to recognize these injustices across the world. However, due to the proclivity of his desires, he is prone to making those choices where he can obtain benefits based on short-term gains. The Quran has drawn his attention to avoiding going for the immediate benefits of life and not considering the long-term effects of his choices. This would have been fine if his life was going to end with his physical death. However, the existence of the life of the hereafter places a maximum premium on this decision-making. Most human beings do not realize that their stay as physical beings in this world is finite. And this is where the students of the Quran can come to their rescue and tell them, make them realize that in terms of, for example, if somebody is 50 years old, one can tell them that in another 50 years, you won't be around in this world, according to the statistics. So have you done something about that? And of course, then leave the decision to them. Then connected with his choice and intent is also the issue of curtailing the choice of others, while the same man wishes to have maximum choice for himself. And this is another very important point, that these people at the top, it is not that they do not know what choices they are making and how much leeway, how much freedom they have in making their choices, even within the economic domain. And why are they restricting the choices of others, equal human beings like them at the lower end? And we come across this kind of a talk as well, that we have given this help to so and so servant, and he has gone and eaten some ice cream. And then one wonders that if he, as a human being, wishes to have some ice cream, why should it be stopped? Why should he be stopped from doing that? And obviously, such human beings do not take pleasure as being equal with other human beings. This aspect impinges on his self-development as it creates an inner conflict, and if such people rise to power, they end up impinging on the freedom of many others. The next slide is, no human being can be the subject of another one, and it is the continuation of the same permanent value. By being the possessor of choice and intent, no human being who's equal can formulate laws to control a fellow human being and force him to obey these laws. This is against human eminence, respect, and dignity that another similar human being should make laws and issue commands to control the freedom of fellow mortals. And that is why Quran wants to take away the right to rule from human hands to Allah's hands, that is through his laws. That is, under the system of deen, we willingly place our own rule in the hands of Allah, that is in the values of the Quran. And then we can imagine that how much freedom we get. And that is the kind of freedom which we need to imagine and then work for it. It is through the guidance of the Quran that Allah invites us to bring ourselves and bodies within the domain of His laws and values, so that we can bring out all those latent potentials which are meant to be developed. We have discussed some permanent values. In light of these, we can judge which potentials can be manifested and which simply cannot be developed within the man-made systems. For example, we have seen that through these permanent values which we have gone through, we are bringing out are those latent potentials which were there to understand these values. And now we understand those values and their impact on the man-made systems and in the world. In the first stage, we fail to even recognize the weaknesses and drawbacks of these man-made systems, especially if we happen to be beneficiaries of the Taghuti system. If we fail to recognize the injustices unleashed by the man-made systems on most of mankind, then essentially we are failing to bring out the latent potential of recognizing equality due to being human, which essentially means that we ourselves are subhuman. And continuing with the same topic, through these permanent values, we have been able to learn about some potentials of ours using which we can keenly observe those issues of life which people who are devoid of Quranic guidance simply do not even think about. For example, the importance of recognizing the existence of the self and its potentials in order to develop to acquire greater eminence and loftiness in life. Another latent potential which becomes manifested is to hold our thoughts and deeds accountable, which leads to raising the level of consciousness to a very high level, because then we will be very much concentrating on every choice we make in our life, every decision we make in our life, and we know what should be, and we will try to find out what will be the consequences of it. By letting the concept of Allah find its place in our intellect, this opens up the acquisition of a new life by ourselves. This ultimately provides the assurance and certainty which is required to strive on the path of deen and helps us to understand the importance of the acceptance of Iman. Another important change takes place in the human psyche, which helps in perceiving the chains resulting from false beliefs and dogmas, with the guidance then assisting us in ridding ourselves of all these chains one by one. Ultimately, a stage comes where we are unable to breathe freely, and the possibility and importance of deen becomes clearly apparent to us. Next value, promote good and forbid evil. And first, let us look at the general aspect. At a number of places, the Quran has noted, for example, in this verse from Surah Al Imran, Kuntum khaira ummatin ukhrijat linnasi ta'muruna bil ma'rufi wa tanhauna anil munkar. You are the best of peoples evolved for mankind. And what you do? You promote maruf, you promote good and forbid evil, that is munkar. So it is a collective responsibility of Jamaat-e-Momineen, and for that you need a piece of land where you should have your own power. In another verse, yuminuna billahi wal yawmil akhire wa yamuruna bil ma'rufi wa yanhauna anil munkar. They have iman in Allah and the hereafter. See how hereafter is now linked to this permanent value and the hereafter. Enjoin maruf. Maruf is all that is good according to the Quran, and forbid wrong, all that is evil, that is wrong. And we know that evil and wrong is that which affects human self, and it degrades human self. And of course, if we don't promote good and forbid evil, then obviously our self is not developed. We have seen that even under the man-made systems, whenever people in general point out any mistakes and flaws, there tend to be fewer problems. In the lands in which people remain silent and do not point out any wrongs, those societies deteriorate rapidly. And this is true of the families as well. If we see our children not behaving properly and we do not sit with them and guide them, then obviously we are up for a big surprise sometimes in the future. This value is part of the system of accountability and creates some checks and balances within a society. In the context of party systems, it is generally presented as an argument to support democracy with a multi-party system, that one party acts as a check against another party. For example, the ruling party is opposed by the opposition. And in today's world, we can see that in the West, more or less, it is uniparty. The parties have similar agenda. That is to exploit others and to minimize whatever little freedom their public has. The media is also viewed as being part of this system of checks and balances. However, as we know, in these systems, human beings on all sides are making decisions via their unbridled desires and intellect, and such psyches make choices according to relative values. And they are on a slippery slope, and their own desires and emotions introduce biases in their decision making. This is why these systems simply cannot avoid the natural decline and deterioration inbuilt in these kind of systems. And we can see plenty of evidence for that. Now, further elaboration of this permanent value, it is the duty. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Mu'min men and women are companions of each other. They enjoin maruf and forbid munkar. See how important that equality as man and woman has been put forward by the Quran, that this is the duty of both. It is not that one should say that it is the duty of men and men should say no, it is the duty of women. That is why it is wrong to say that bringing up the family is the responsibility of women. No, it is the responsibility of both. Because if children go wrong, then both will suffer, the whole family will suffer, society will suffer, and the world will suffer at large. This value provides justification for their existence in the world, and the absence of this will create a world just like 2024. Maruf means those works or matters which the Quranic society declares as being correct and acceptable. And maruf also means, because the root is arf, and which also means that people should know about it. And that is why whatever Quran puts forward, we know it and we can relate it to the world around us, which are recognized by it, or in the language of the law are declared as being valid. These can only be those matters which are found as commands in the Quran and permitted by it. Next word is munkar, and the root is given here, means intellectual deception, guile, deceit, every one of those things which are not good. So it is quite related to our inner psyche as well, because it is the psyche which commits bad if it is not guided. Something which cannot be recognized, the opposite of maruf. Munkar are those matters which the society does not recognize and does not declare as being valid, i.e. from which the Quran forbids. That means the man-made system munkars are different from the Quranic system of deen. This is the duty of the Islamic State and the Mu'mineen. Knowledge and training have to take place prior to the establishment of the system. The pioneers need to make it a part of their selves. The words Amr and Nahi are pointing to the fact that these are not sermons or preaching but need to be acted upon. These are included in the duties of the government. These words are used in this Yamuruna, which is Amr, and Yanhauna, that is Nahi. Now, some references I have used in these slides to help us. Those rules and codes and customs and cultural things will also fall under Maruf, which are not against the Quran and are made valid by the Islamic society in the light of Quranic guidance. And it has to be through mutual consultation. Secret consultations are permitted in the matter of Maruf. The responsibility of people's deeds is not that of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, but it is their duty to keep reminding and admonishing the people. For example, the law of requital. So under the system of deen, individual will never lose his own unity of thought, his own integrity, and his own individuality, because he will still be held accountable at the level of his own self. Those who are more educated and know about the Quran, they need to forbid people from evil. So people who are, for example, students of the Quran and know more, they need to share it with others. Firstly, of course, within the families, friends, and then to wider public. This permanent value points to the fact that both men and women participate in it. Both possess the same potentials at the level of the self, and their hearts need to be united prior to performing their role effectively. Very important. We have seen that when we follow these permanent values, even understanding these values lead us to looking for those who are also on this path. And verse 3:103 we should go through it again. Those who resolve to perform this role, their selves develop and they become eligible to divine protection. This is part of the process of acquiring a developed self. It was the duty of the messenger, and of course, messenger was a human being, so it is our duty as well. Allah forbids from fosha and munkar. Again, Allah says that do not follow the path of evil. The next permanent value is obedience of the law. No society or system can be established and can survive unless some limits are imposed on the people. The Quran states that these limits will be prescribed through law, and the limits of the principles of these laws will be prescribed according to the revelation that is from Allah. The Quran states, Ma kana li basharin an yutiyahu Allahul kitaba wal hukma wal nubuwata summa yakula lin nasi kunu ibadalli min dunillah walakin kunu rabbaniyana bima kuntum tuallimuna al kitaba wa bima kuntum tadrusun. And this verse is also important from that permanent value which we have already covered, that a man has no right to subjugate another human being to his own laws. We should follow Allah's laws. No man has been accorded the right that Allah gave him a code of laws, government and nubuwwat, and he says to the people that leaving Allah aside, you become my subjects and slaves. Very important, all messengers of Allah fall into it as well. And important is that people who want to follow the Quran should keep that in mind, that it is not following the messenger, it is following the Quran, which is to be kept in mind. Messengers act as human models, that if they could do it, we can do it too. What he should say is this, that you should all become Rabbani, that is bearers of the system of Rububiyat of Allah, according to that code of laws which you have received from Allah, and which you teach each other and keep imprinting on your hearts. And of course, this is a progressive process of learning. From this, two matters become clear. Firstly, that no human being, even if he is given the authority to formulate sub-clauses or to implement laws, or even if he receives nubuwwat from Allah, has the right to ask another human being to obey his whim. He will only have the law obeyed. That is, he should follow the law himself and then set an example for others. Secondly, that the principles associated with this law will not be devised by human beings themselves, but will be prescribed from Allah. Therefore, obedience in reality will be of the divine laws, not of the laws devised by men themselves. If we look at this, for example, paragraph and this verse, which is elaborated here, we will see that how much freedom we have, how much true freedom we have, and how elevated we feel once we come to terms with this freedom. Next slide is again of the same obedience of the law. The Quran places emphasis on this aspect. Attabi'u ma unzila alaykum min rabbikum wa la tattabi'u min dunihi awliya'a. Follow the revelation given unto you from your Rabb, and follow not as guardians or protectors other than him. Next is, this law will be applicable equally to every individual of society. Even individuals holding the highest rank will not be exempt from this. So much so that even the messenger himself, through whom the divine laws are received by mankind, also proclaims this great truth, that I follow but that which is revealed to me by inspiration. And of course, now we can say that I follow that which is revealed to me in the form of the Quran. And similarly, I am the first of those who bow to his will, divine laws. And that is another important aspect, that we should be able to say clearly that I am for the values of the Quran. This means that first of all, the messenger himself follows this law, and then he asks others to follow it. In this way, no individual is the slave or subject of another individual. And this needs a very highly developed self. And of course, we do not develop this self overnight. It is developed over a period of time and by remaining together. Decisions on disputed matters are resolved according to the book of Allah, which is applicable equally on all individuals. The Quran states, if any do fail to judge by the light of what Allah has revealed, they are non-believers, that is, they are kafirun. And of course, we can see this state of the world which is around us, that since it is a world which is not following the Quranic value system, it is following the man-made values which are based on human unbridled desires, and what is the state of this world is. Next value is, which is the last one, warning and admonishment. The Quran has stated that one task of the messengers was to warn people about their deeds, i.e. telling them that the path they are pursuing will lead to ruin and destruction for them. There are two aspects of this warning. What people do in their physical life, they can figure out through their knowledge and experience that which is beneficial and that which is harmful. In the physical life, it is fairly straightforward. If I put my finger in fire, it will burn. If I am not careful in cutting something, I can cut my finger. So this is fairly straightforward. The issue comes when these things affect ourselves. This aspect falls under physical laws. For example, people know that smoking and alcohol is not good for their health, and they still do it. And they do it because they don't have higher purpose in life. They think this life is going to end with death. As far as the life related to the self is concerned, man cannot find out himself about it, as to which thing will strengthen his self and what will lead to weakness and disintegration. And this is where the Quran comes in. This can be found out through the revelation. From this respect, the messengers are called munzareen, those who make aware, and this duty of theirs is called anzar. And this is also the duty of the students of the Quran who wish to tread on this path. The messengers were sent to warn and to provide glad tidings. For example, Quran says, Allah ta'budu illallaha innani lakum minhu nazirum wa bashir. That you should follow the laws of none but Allah. Verily, I am sent unto you from him to warn and to bring glad tidings. And that means the person who is now giving this message to others has to understand himself first. Now, continuing with this permanent value, since we possess choice and intent, our choices not only have consequences attached to them for us, but also for our fellow mortals in the world. Then this choice making is kept there with the purpose of developing ourselves with a view to creating a better world in this life. And then moving on to the next phase of life, as part of the evolutionary process of life, which has been created as part of the purpose of human creation. So we are moving forward individually as well as collectively. Individually, we are moving forward towards our physical death. The issue before us is, have I got that self which can survive the shock of death or not? The Quran has stated that no nation becomes destroyed until it has been warned. Zalika an lam yakun rabbuka muhlikal qura bi zulmin wa ahluha ghafilun. Thus your Rabb will not destroy for their wrongdoing habitations while their occupants were unwarned. And we can see that, for example, in the Ukraine war and the previous wars, these powerful nations have been warned repeatedly. And the consequences of what they are doing are also visible to them, but they still insist on following the evil path. This warning comes in various ways. For example, through the messengers of Allah in the past, through those who understand the book of Allah, through the consequences of human deeds, and this is a slow process because it is based on trial and error. Through the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, if they have established Deen as a system in some part of the world, and this is missing in today's world. If it was there, then these wars would have ended long time back. Through the learned men of a nation, by the public at large, as is happening through social media. And again, it is a very slow process because all these general public on social media, they are weak people. They are already enslaved. They do not come to the Quran even to understand their own strength. So this is a very slow process through the cumulative effects of own evil deeds and conducts. Next slide is warning becomes a permanent value as it helps to raise awareness about the importance of human life, and it is part of becoming muttaqi. Through this, we remain aware of the risks in life and carry out effective risk management in everything we do. Its application is both the physical life and the human self. Because when I warn others, I'm actually becoming aware of my own failings, and it is a warning to myself as well. It can't happen that if one is not convinced of something, is telling others, it is bound to affect his own self. Regarding the human self, the Quran has stated, لِجُنْزِرَ مَنْ كَانَ حَيًّا وَيَحِقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. And this part of the verse we should remember by heart, لِجُنْزِرَ مَنْ كَانَ حَيًّا. That Quran is a warning for those who wish to remain alive or who are alive. That it may give admonition to anyone who are alive, and that charge may be proved against those who opt for kufr. So through the Quran, we are trying to get this new life to which the Quran points our attention to. The Quran is revealed to warn us about the pitfalls of wrong decision making. And Quran says, وَأُوهِيَ إِلَيَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنُ لِأُنذِرَكُمْ بِهِ. This Quran has been revealed to me, that is the messenger says, and now we will say to others that I have got this Quran from Allah and I'm passing on to you, and while I have already been warned by my own self through the Quran. The Quran has been revealed to me via wahi that I may warn you and all whom it reaches. Who can benefit from this warning? Quran says, وَأَنذِرْ بِهِ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَنْ يُحْشَرُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ لَيْسَ لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ وَلِيٌّ وَلَا شَفِيعٌ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. O Lord, there, give this warning to those in whose heart is the fear that they will be brought before their Rabb. Except for him, they will have no protector, no intercessor. So our deeds are the ones, after acquiring Iman, which will provide us protection. Now over here, what I've done towards the end in this last slide is I've drawn, out of interest, a schematic that which world do we wish to live in. This is the world we are living, and this is the world where we are sharing this presentation. Man-made world of 2024 based on relative values. Might is right is one of the man-made values. Divide and rule, we can see that. Another version of saying is divide and conquer. Different laws for rich and poor. Fear and huzn is rampant. Life ends with death, and that is the presumption on which most human beings live their life. Man-made laws restrict freedom. Division, for example, sects, parties, nationalism, racism, everything is prevalent in today's world. Reward is for the capital. Earth under Taguti system. So that is the story of the world around us. The question which arises in the mind, is it meant to be like this? The Quran says no, it is meant to be different. And what it is meant to be? Imagining world under the domain of permanent values. And I've only put down some because of the restriction of the size of the slide. Human self at the center of creation. Human respect plus dignity, we have covered these two values. Concept of Allah, we have covered it. The law of requital, we have also covered this one. Death, its purpose plus readiness, we have covered this one as well. Justice, no fear in injustice. Assurance of the hereafter, these are also covered. No man-made laws, covered. Promote good, forbid evil. Ranks as per deeds. And then Quran says, La ikraha fid deen qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. That in the matter of deen, there is no compulsion, either external or internal. Both paths of good and bad, or light and darkness, have been made clear in the Quran. And whoever rejects this word of 2024, that is Taghuti system, then accepts Iman in Allah, and then the path will become clear. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.